coffee. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwicta.
This is Merps. Hope you guys are having fun and, more importantly, winning in the Taverns of Time arena. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about this week. But
Really?
first,
Really, we're going to talk about the completely different arena that's happening right now.
Yep, indeed. And we got 2 more weeks to go. So if you guys have been living under a rock or just been busy for the past week,
and if you missed the 3-hour Lightforge that happened last week, shame on you.
But we are currently in the Taverns of Time, which is in, we have all these new cards in the arena, and it goes until July 3rd. So there are a little bit more than 2 weeks left for this event.
Yeah. So we'll dig right in. We're going to talk about the cards, we're going to talk about the classes, we're going to talk about the overall meta, what you normally expect for the Lightforge after a meta shift has happened. But first I want to give a shout out to Chanman in Value Town and Dreads. We did a really long episode actually of Value Town, which is a Hearthstone podcast if you didn't know. They mostly center on Constructed as most other Hearthstone podcasts do, but we're in the arena meta now, so everyone's like, oh, what's happening in the arena? And so me and Dreads went in and we discussed like a review almost of the cards after we've gotten a chance to see them played against us and to play with them. So a shout out there, and also for the Angry Chicken podcast. Dills and I had a nice conversation there and talked more generally about the new cards and what Blizzard is doing with the arena and limited format. So go check them out. That's Value Town and the Angry Chicken. I think on the latest episodes, that should be the one that I was on, and give them a follow, especially if you're interested in Constructed as well. They're definitely a very good resource for the entire Hearthstone scene.
Yep. Yeah, you've had a pretty busy week going out, spreading the good word of the arena. I saw you and Dreads on Value Town. You guys basically just went through the cards and your thoughts on it, impact on the meta, that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah, we went through the cards. It's like almost like a review instead of a preview, right? So if you listen to the last episode of the Lightforge, we did 3 hours of previews of where we thought the cards are, and now that we're actually in the meta, we know exactly how the meta is. And we did a review of how the cards were, whether it matched up with expectations or not. And some things have even changed since then. Like one of the points I was making, just because I thought it was really weird, was this like Bronze Broodmother, right? Which is a 5/5 5-mana dragon and paladin. This is a new card, and it gets a 1/1 as soon as it's drawn into your hand, like on the board. It just kind of happens. So it's one of those cards, and we thought it was pretty good. We rated it like a 110, and we didn't really think much about it. And the win rates were ridiculous in the first 2 days. Now the win rates have calmed down a little, so I think it was like maybe a little bit of a statistical blip, but it's still really high. Like it's next to like Blessing of Kings, Blessing of Wisdom, Sword of Justice, Dark Conviction. So like it's around where we have it rated now, but which is decently high what we expected. But at the time, it was I was really like puzzling over why that card was so like successful.
Okay, so it's fallen back, or it's
fallen back a little. It's fallen back a little since then. It's actually been on a downward trend ever since it was introduced. And again, this is a card that, good players, bad players, no one uses it better, or there's no like weird strategy with it. It's a little bit RNG, but it's not even huge RNG. You just like get a 1/1 on the board if you draw it, or you don't.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things, but yeah, like things change very fast in a new meta as it settles, and we look at HS replay stats in the beginning just to kind of see if anything's weird, and so far it's pretty much what we expected. The stats are lining up how we expected them to. Some of the RNG cards may have higher win rates than you would find on the Lightforge tier list, but that is normal. If you guys don't know, the Lightforge tier list has a pretty hefty penalty for RNG because it assumes your win rate is 75%. And if your win rate is less, then you're okay with more RNG, and if your win rate is higher, wow. And 2, then you would want to penalize RNG even more, because RNG, the value of RNG is directly related to your win rate, like your regular win rate. So something like Cavern Dreamer, which is dominating the arena right now in epic fashion, we rated really, really high. We rated a 154 to start, and we haven't adjusted it. We went through one round of adjustments so far, but I don't think any new card moved more than like 5 points. So Cavern Dreamer was 154. It stayed a 154. A Fireball's a 154. A Polymorph is a bit lower. Your Meteor, Flame Strikes, and Primordial Glyphs are the cards that are significantly higher in Mage. So there's not that many cards significantly higher than than Cavern Dreamers. But if you look at the win rates, because it's a very heavy RNG card, and the first card you get back from it, even if it lives for many turns, is very important because that's the card you need to get tempo to support your Cavern Dreamer to keep it alive. So if you get a Frostbolt from that, or like, Breath of Cinder Ghost or whatever, it's very different than if you get a useless spell the first one and then get more useful spells later on potentially.
Yeah, I mean, you could get Sacrificial Pact, which I have gotten, right? You could get Doomerang, which we have also gotten.
Yeah.
Very possible. But even with this, huge RNG...
I feel less bad about this now. People are figuring out Cavern Dreamer. See, again, like I said, from the time, because I last looked at the HS replay stats when I was doing Value Town with Chanman and Dreads. And since then, Cavern Dreamer's win rate has... Cavern Dreamer's win rate hasn't gone down. Yeah. I guess other win rates have gone up.
Yeah.
Because it's relative. Yeah. Meteor's win rate has spiked. Holy crap. Yeah, Meteor's win rate has gone up 3%, which is huge, by the way, when it comes to win rates. Like, the difference between a good card and a bad card, like, actually, like, a premium card and, like, a card you don't even want in your deck is, like, 10% at most. So, Meteor has spiked by 3% in terms of win rate in the last, like, few days, actually.
Weird.
Which is kind of weird. I don't have a good explanation for it, but it's always been that high. But now it's kind of reclaimed its throne from Cavern Dreamer. And now Flame Strike is once again above Cavern Dreamer. Leyline Manipulator is very good in this meta, and that's gone up.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Now you have so many generation cards that gives you cards that weren't originally in your deck. So Leyline Manipulator... Previously, maybe you hit it and then maybe you reduce like something by 2 mana.
But now it's ridiculous. We're undervaluing it on our tier list right now because we did not that was not picked up by the algorithm. Right. Unfortunately.
And lots of people are doing the Cavern Dreamers as well. So they have like a handful of like 4 spells and then
and Consider the Past is offered everywhere. It's like, I mean, it's not really. It's definitely misbucketed, but it's misbucketed in the same sense that Arcane Intellect is misbucketed. Like, we all expected it to be bucketed low.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, Blizzard just doesn't think card draws are as valuable as they are. Probably because card draws support archetypes that take more turns, which requires more decision-making. And you also notice all the Discovery cards are bucketed a little low, too, by Blizzard for the same reason. Anytime you add more decision-making in, the average player is going to do worse than what you're going to do, assuming you're an above-average player. So our tier list, okay, so the Cavern Dreamer looks better now than it did before, even statistically speaking. I think it's now about where it was, and we just always had it there. So that's good. Primordial Glyph is always going to look high on our tier list because that's one of those cards where the difference between a good and a bad player is pretty stark. Like, once you get past the auto picks. Okay. So you want to talk about Cavern Dreamer and what its impact on the meta is? I think that's the right place to start.
Yeah. All right. So if we talk about Cavern Dreamer, we also need to just talk about Mage, right? And if you go to HS Replay and you look at the class win rates for Arena, Mage is number 1 right now with a 53.5% win rate. It is on top of the meta. Shaman follows it, fairly closely, and then there's a decent jump from that to Warlock, and you got Druid bringing up the rear. But Mage is number 1, and I think a big part of it is because of Cavern Dreamer. And Cavern Dreamer, if you guys are not aware of what this card is, it's a 2-mana 1/3 minion. And at the end of your turn, add a random spell that costs 2 mana or less to your hand. If you have played the arena recently, you have seen this card. If you have visited Arena HS or just been on any sort of Hearthstone forums recently, you have seen complaints about this card.
People
I
have
think
literally called to nerf this card, which,
yeah,
one, it's a 3-week meta. Like, unless this card is actually making the entire game unplayable, it's not going to get nerfed. And two, this is not the most problematic card in the arena. It's bad, but like we said, right? It's not even the highest rated card when we rated it. It's definitely not the most swingy card. Like,
yeah. So the problem with this card, and look, is it a good design? No, it is definitely not good design. Blizzard should not have, like, once again, this is a card in which, if this were just a normal card, like if this wasn't a 3-week event, then everyone has every right to be up in arms.
Yes.
Like, but like if it's just for 3 weeks, do I think this card should be nerfed in a vacuum? Yeah, of course. Do I think it should be nerfed for this 3-week event / will it be nerfed? Definitely not.
Yeah. But and just in case, like, Mage's win rate is 53.5% right now. It used to be about 50%. The second highest is 52.1%, which is Shaman, and then you have a bunch of ones like around 50%. So
yeah,
Mage is definitely dominating right now in the arena, and this is not like a thing where like, good players, bad players, everyone benefits in terms of like being able to use Mage very well, because Cavern Dreamers is one of those cards where if you're like, you have this whole thing where it's random cards, right? So there's a skill element removed, but at the same time, you have to know when to play those cards and how to use all the types of cards. So it's not just like I deal random damage on the board, right? Like, there's still an element involved in there. So it's one of those things where, like, I think right now it's just Mage is just at the top of the meta. I don't think there's a lot of argument for it, no matter who you are as a player.
Yeah. So, all right. And I think part of the win rate sort of shifting differential is like at the beginning of the event, I had no, like, everyone was just playing what they wanted to play, right? And sort of like just picking random stuff. I had no idea what the impact would be. And this is like us, even, us previewing it as well, because there was so much like stuff like Consider the Past, in which I'm like, I don't really know the full extent of Consider the Past, right? Like all the spells in the past. So there was just a lot of question marks. A lot of people were playing it. And then I faced a few mages. I was like, wow, this Cavern Dreamer thing is really annoying. And I think everyone else who played it was like, this is insanely powerful. And everyone who faced it was like, this is insanely annoying. And then people just recognized it, right? And started taking it. So, all right.
I don't know if it took anyone any time to recognize this. We literally, like, if you go to the last Lightforge, we basically, like, for lack of a better word,
I think it did take people, because I didn't see as many Cavern Dreamers in early mages.
Really?
No, I didn't. I think people were still.
But in the early mages, why wouldn't you just automatically pick the new card? It's not even in the top bucket, by the way. Not that it's necessarily wrong. It's in the second bucket. The top bucket has, and this is weird, but the top bucket has Fireball, Flame Strike, Meteor, and Polymorph. Right. Flame Strike and Meteor we have rated significantly higher than Cavern Dreamer. Fine. Fireball, Polymorph we have rated basically around where Cavern Dreamer is, and that's whatever, right? Like, because it could have been on the line. Like, we know Cavern Dreamer is in the high end of the buckets. By the way,
right.
A huge shout out to Taro and I forget his name, the guy that's actually programming the program that's extracting data for this.
Jarkin.
Yeah, Jarkin. And shout out to Jarkin for getting this up so quickly. So the spreadsheet that if you go on Arena HS, it'll be there. The spreadsheet that normally told you where the buckets were now tells you all the sub buckets and the new cards. So we've been using that as a resource. It's been really helpful. And they got that up. They got the new cards up within, like, I don't know, like 3-4 days. And they got the inter buckets up within a week of the meta change. So huge shout out to them for getting the quick work done, and it's very helpful, and it's fairly easy to use. I don't think it takes a lot of, like, studying to figure out, like, how Blizzard is rating these cards.
Yeah. So look, with the Cavern Dreamer, I think at the beginning, you had your bucket of people, and we're bucketing people now too. You had your people that just pick the new cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you also had people that were just like, hey, I just want to make a coherent deck. And with them, it's like, they didn't exactly see the potential in Cavern Dreamer, like 2 mana, 1/3. And then they just didn't pick it as much. I will say at the very beginning, maybe it was just unlucky/lucky on my part, but the mages I faced did not have as many Cavern Dreamers as I see them have now. Like now it's like you see a Cavern Dreamer, you pick a Cavern Dreamer, right? And then that opens up the rest of your deck in
Yeah,
terms
your
of
entire deck build, by the way, for Mage is now builds around Cavern Dreamer and Consider the Past. Because there's offering rate bonus. And what we said before, the offering rate bonus of plus 100%. We have so much data now; it's plus 100%. That's the Taverns of Time offering rate bonus. We got it from Dr. Stein last weekend when we were doing the Lightforge, but we didn't really know. But now there's enough stuff out there; it's kind of obvious. It's plus 100%. And with plus 100% of a bonus, your entire like archetype warps around these cards. And Cavern Dreamer is a card draw engine, and Consider the Past draws you a ton of cards. So for the mage, how you want to play, how you want to draft is a really nice curve, including 1-drops. Like Mana Worms are so premium now, especially because you have your Cavern Dreamers giving you small spells a lot. And once you have a curve, you have your card draw engines that will draw you enough cards to sustain you for the late game. Like the type of mages that succeeded really well before this, which involved a lot of reach and a lot of like explosive traps. Explosive runes don't do so well anymore because they've been diluted. Not only are there inter buckets, so you're not stuck in that one bucket where you're kind of forced to take explosive runes a lot. But your synergies for secrets are all diluted, and your reach cards are all diluted as well because these Taverns of Time cards don't really have reach.
Yep, that's definitely one thing that is missing in these Taverns of Time cards, and you can see a theme right with all of these cards. It's about card advantage. It's about like reaching into the past and getting wild cards and doing and like deck manipulation. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But what it doesn't do is, you're missing lots of removals. You're missing lots of taunts.
Yeah.
They don't provide that. So what they do provide is this like wacky card advantage game. But if you want your taunts, if you want your aggressive tools, you're going to have to rely on the old cards.
Yep. And that's another warning. There's not a lot of taunts anymore because of the dilution, which one means your aggro strategy is pretty effective now compared to what it was before. And you'll see like hunters especially really take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So hunters are also in a good place right now. I don't know what the win rate is to it, but if you've adjusted like to the hunter, they're not actually doing that well in the win rate wise. The average player is doing like mediocre with it. But hunter's in a good place meta wise. You can very much smork people down again. There's not anywhere near as many taunts as there used to be.
Yeah, with hunters, it's a double whammy for hunters in a good way because, like we said, removals got diluted, and people want to pick the new cards, right? They want to pick Timely Wanderer to see what it gets. They want to, just take the more even vanilla cards like what was it, the 4/5 shuffler, right?
Yep.
Possibility Seeker.
Yep.
And while it has good stats and they can find answers, it doesn't taunt, it doesn't have initiative. So removals have been diluted, but hunters got the best removal of this event, right?
Hunters are the only class that got double removals.
Yeah.
And most classes got no removals in their class cards.
Yeah. And Chrono Shot is insane. Mm-hmm. It is a card that I would say can only be sort of like printed for an event such as this, because not only it breaks like 2 rules. Not only is it like so OP, like brokenly OP, it like breaks sort of the boundaries of what a hunter should be able to do. Yep. Right? You look at the removal, and the removal is all conditional. It's either Deadly Shot, in which, if they have 2 minions and you're not able to like, trade and to have the Deadly Shot hit 100%, or you have Hunter's Mark, in which you need something else as well. So you could tell that they don't want to give hunters a Naturalize or an Assassinate, right? Like anything, or Siphon Soul, anything that you can point to this thing and say, no, I don't want this on the board anymore, because that's just too dangerous. That's too good for a hunter. And they gave them a cheap, a cheap removal that, like just, it's freezing trap on a stick, it's sap on a stick, whatever analogy you want. It's way too good. It's way too powerful.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I agree with you that it breaks the rule of Hunter, but
Yeah.
I don't agree that if this was a regular card, it would like break the game or anything like that.
Right.
And,
I mean, it all depends
look at it
on
right
what
now.
hunters can do.
Look at it right now. Hunter's win rates are mediocre. I'm not saying hunters aren't very powerful, but people don't figure out how to use this card. Like they don't build the archetypes that you know how to build. That we know how to build. That if you listen to the Lightforge for like maybe not in the last year, but the year before that, every time we talked about Hunter, Merps is going on and on about aggro Hunter. And that's where the archetype is coming from, right? And if you look at the actual value in here, Chrono Shot's value is literally the highest value card in Hunter. Like, but it's 1 point higher than Eaglehorn Bow. Like the fact that Eaglehorn Bow exists makes Chrono Shot be the very top. Like it's not busting any brackets. It's not like when Druid got Ultimate Infestation. It's not like when Paladins got Silver Sword. Right? Like I don't think it's as bad as those things. Or like when Mages got Meteor. Those things were all way worse, and they continue to exist in the arena, and there is really not that much protest against it. Like, Silver Sword, the protest isn't that it exists in the arena, it's that it's for some reason in the third bucket instead of the first one. Meteors, no one complains about Meteors anymore. It's one of the more ridiculous cards in the game. The UI, people still complain about. But yeah, I mean, people complain about steeds more than silver swords, I think, for whatever reason. And yeah, I got annoyed when there was a million steeds around, but as a card, steed is not like the most broken thing. And rogues, right? Rogues always had sap. Like, sure, rogues aren't really hunter, but still, sap is better than Chrono
it's
Shot.
Very different. The thing with Chrono Shot is like that is a card which would significantly limit sort of design. And it's like you cannot make Hunter-esque cards if you give it also a card like Chrono Shot, right? Because with Hunters, they've typically
given do you mean constructed?
No, not even
even in arena?
No, not even just constructed. I think in arena, you can't give Hunters a card like Chrono Shot and still sort of like go down the path to, give it like the sometimes cheaper minions than other classes that they like for to give them, like to give them the other sort of aggressive package. Because with a hunter, you have to give them an aggressive package. But if you give them a Chrono Shot, it severely limits their any sort of aggressive package that you can give them.
I agree that Chrono Shot is not flavored the way hunters are normally flavored, but I disagree about the balance wise. That's what micro adjusts are for. That's what class micro adjusts are for. Blizzard could just hit the button and then Hunter will be balanced class-wise. Sure, it'll lose flavor, but like I think you could give Hunter a couple more 2-drops and 1-drops and then still have Chrono Shot in, and it would be fine. You just see less Chrono Shots, and you see less Eaglehorn Bows, and you see less, all of your really good cards. Like, this is how Blizzard's doing things now. We're not in the place where there's design space worries in the arena. Like, in the arena, there's two things. One is hitting the button and making sure that it's not too ridiculous. And as we see from the win rates right now with Chrono Shot in, like, and really, like, to be honest, Hunter is one of the best counters to mages right now. So in a mage meta, Hunter counters mages. Hunters have Chrono Shot and Infinite Wolf. It's like between Hunter, Mage, and Shaman, they're the winners, the big winners of this expansion. And yet Hunter's win rates are still like number 5 out of 9.
Because here's the thing, I don't know if because Hunters typically counter mages. I don't know if they do in this expansion. They
get out early. They have plenty of early removals for the Cavern Dreamers. Their entire goal, they're one of the few classes where you will get 1-drops and 2-drops, like in a normal.
But they don't really get out early.
Well, they should get out early.
You can try. You typically like.
Right, but like you're making the effort. No other classes these days make the effort to get out early except Paladin.
Yeah, But
So when it comes to countering Mage Cavern Dreamer, it's really about having removals in the early game or getting out on the board early. And so you
right,
have like what, Paladins and Hunters. Those are your two counters.
right. I'm saying you could try. It's just not consistent, right? Like even if you really wanted to
Well,
go
it's more
early,
consistent than any other class. That's what I'm
sure.
saying.
And it's part of the reason why Mage is so good, right?
Right,
Because
yeah.
even in classes that try to, or like that naturally fit into their game plan, right? Like they counter, quote, counter,
Yeah.
Cavern Dreamer naturally.
Yeah,
They don't have
right.
to like reach in order to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, even then, it's just not consistent.
Right. Oh, I'm not saying they like hard counter Cavern Dream or anything, but I'm saying even in this scenario where they're doing the best at it, they're not getting higher win rates. You know who's getting higher win rates? Things that don't counter Mage at all, like Shaman, like Warlock, and then you have Paladin. But yeah, and then Paladin Hunter. But like Shaman and Warlocks are getting ahead of the game. Why? I don't know. There's still Chrono Shot there. It's not even being more negatively adjusted than it used to be on in terms of the class adjustments, because they haven't, like, Blizzard hasn't hit the button yet when it comes to adjusting class cards for class balance, because it's a new event. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a problem to keep cards like Chrono Shot in the game, and I think that's one of the big takeaways I have from Taverns of Time. So we were initially last episode like very worried about how much of a RNG fiesta this will turn into. And we were going with the understanding, like right before the episode, we were told that Chromie and Morazond were actually legendaries, which helped a lot. But even after that, we thought that the rest of the cards were commons. And as Taro is pointing out in the chat right now, and as we, like, you know, play, we also see the same thing. Stasis Dragon and Timebound Giant are effectively being offered at the rate of epics.
Yep.
Rather than commons, and they're two of the neutral cards. And if you remember from our last episode, Timebound Giant was the card, along with Timeway Wanderer, that I isolated as problematic cards, where, like, these are cards that, regardless of how good or bad they are in the arena, as long as they are around like Yeti level or higher levels of good and have that much RNG swing, it creates the swing in the arena that good players can't come back from, and is very, like, more detrimental to skill than adding a bunch of bad RNG cards or adding a bunch of good RNG cards, but the RNG is slight. Like, Timebound Giant gets you like 6 extra tempo in a not insignificant amount of scenarios, and you don't need to even set it up. This is not counting synergies. This is like, you just play it on turn 15.
Yep.
So yeah, so that card, Timeway Wanderer, being an epic, Timebound Giant being an epic, that is that really helps control the game. And I think the takeaway is, it's not really that bad in the arena right now. Like, yeah, it's more random than it used to be before these cards came in, but it's definitely not even all that close, I think, in my opinion, personally, to the line that we were afraid it was going to cross. Now, if all of these cards were actually common, as we thought they were, as Blizzard didn't really give too much of an indication, they didn't give any indication that any of these were going to be epic. And for the legendary cards, the only indication Blizzard had given beforehand was the little, like, portrait arc has the dragon wings. To be fair,
that is the indication.
Okay, but no one got it. Like, we talked to members of the arena community all the time before this, after this. Like, I would estimate definitely less than 15%, probably less than 10%. Of serious arena players believed that Morazon and Chromie were going to be legendaries rather than commons. Like, you could just go and look at all the reviews, like all the card previews and reviews. It's just a whole bunch of, like, arena players going like, "Oh my god, this is crazy! Like, this is gonna make arena ridiculous." It's because no one got it.
Yep. Well, even if, like, because part of the reviews, even if you know the rarity, like, the review still holds true, right? Like, the card is insane.
Okay, fine.
Those cards are
but no
insane.
one mentioned that it was a legendary. You know?
Okay.
Like, it's a pretty important part of the card, right? That it is a legendary in the arena.
Yeah. All right. So, look, we have 2 more weeks of this event. And I do agree. It's not the worst meta we have ever seen, right? You have people complaining about Cavern Dreamers, and we've gone through many metas in which people have complained about, fill in the blank card,
Mm-hmm.
right? Keeper of Oldemon, Firelands Portal, etc., etc. You can go through it, and with this event, I would say, look, hopefully what Blizzard is doing is they're getting some valuable information, right? Because we definitely can see sort of certain themes that potentially they're trying to test. Like, number one, the shuffle theme, right? Like, so what they're doing, like just certain themes that I see during this event are deck manipulation, right? Number two, just calling quote from the past. This from the past thing is something that perhaps we'll see later on in actual expansions, and you also see certain cards just trying to push the envelope of either randomness or just sort of power levels. So yeah, props to Blizzard for making an event that I would say is not too bad. And hopefully they are getting a lot of good information.
Yeah, so. And it's like I realized how not bad it was when I talked to you on I think like after Tuesday when you play the arena like solo for the first time, and you're like, oh my god, it's so much RNG, it's terrible. I'm like, what's horrible? What's the RNG horrible about it? And you listed 5 things, and none of them were Taverns of Time cards. They were just normal, horrible arena RNG stuff that happens, like from MCTs to, getting, I don't know. Like...
No, I unlisted Cavern Dreamer.
Okay, you listed Cavern Dreamer once, but that card aside, most of your other list was pre-existing arena.
Wanderer into UI.
Okay, fine. Okay, so 2. So 2 of your 5, all right? 40% of your complaints was from the new cards. But along with the list, I don't have the list with me, but it's stuff like MCT, it's stuff like Shadow Madness, or maybe it was Kodo, something like that has to do with the attack scores. And it's stuff that's still, like, that had existed before, and that actually got diluted out with Taverns of Time cards. So I think there's definitely a line in which you cross as a designer when it comes to the RNG-ness and the swinginess of cards. But I think we didn't give Blizzard enough credit for their recognition of it, partly because they didn't tell us about it. Like, we didn't know Timebound Giant was epic. Literally, there was no possible way to know it before people started collecting stats in the arena to know that Timebound Giant was going to be an epic. Like, as an epic, it's still terrible card design, but its impact is much lower, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about an event, you're looking at the overall impact. With events, it's kind of understood that card designs are going to be, like, on the bad side. Because 1, no one's testing it all that much. 2, Blizzard doesn't take arena all that seriously. 3, it's an event. They're really not taking it all that seriously. But you can also tell that Blizzard hasn't just like gone crazy with the power levels of these cards, at least in their minds. Because if you look at how these cards are bucketed, and again, these cards don't get re-bucketed. They just get bucketed once at the beginning of the event. And I don't know if they're going to move them at some other point, but at least up until now, they haven't re-bucketed these cards. Not a single one of the class cards is in the top half of the top bucket. And there's only 2 class cards, or 2 cards period, that are in the top bucket at all. One of which is Stasis Elemental, which we had as one of the like top cards, but not even one of the most problematic cards. And the other one is Chrono Shot, which I think was more obvious that was going to be potentially problematic. But it didn't really even make the list of the very top end. And none of the neutral cards did as well. And so that's, like, part of it is, I think, like, I don't think Blizzard bucketed everything right. But at least from Blizzard's perspective, I think they are considering that they're not trying to totally make Arena an RNG fest with insanely overpowered cards. Like, the cards that they released, we may feel are overpowered. Like, for example, like Cavern Dreamer in the second bucket, like, we would have put it in the first bucket, but I could see an argument for the very top of the second bucket. Like, we had it rated above every card in the second bucket except Primordial Glyph. And that's fine, but it at least shows that Blizzard's intent is not really to treat Arena as like, or this Arena event as, let's give all crazy cards.
So I think you're misinterpreting like basically our conversation from before a little bit. So I just want to clarify. Like my 5 examples are not sort of here are 5 examples of things that are wrong with the arena. If you remember the conversation, it was mostly about it's like, okay, what is right/wrong with the arena, right? And my thing is like, I think there's too many swings in the arena right now, just in general. And then the things I listed were just examples of the ways in which my 2 previous runs ended because of swings. So I'm not saying that like Kodo is a problem, right? Like Kodo is a problem,
right?
You know,
you're saying things like what Kodo does is a problem.
Things like what Kodo does, and I listed sort of like, well, okay, I got Kodo'd, I got Mossy Horde, I got Scorpomatic, right, on my Basilisk. And then past that, it's like, and then I got Timely Wandered into UI, like stuff that I can't. It's like when I drop the Basilisk, I can't say, well, what about this or that if it's just my best play, right?
Yeah.
If it's just my best play.
So tiny sample size, but if you have 40% of your things that were problematic that caused the end of your run into, you know, with the times cards, and times cards these days are, I don't know, maybe like 20% of a deck. Does that seem right? Maybe 25, 20%?
Yeah, something like that.
That means the time cards are about doubly as problematic as your normal arena pool.
Sure. Yeah. So what I'm saying is like the time cards in this time event has further pushed a problem that existed before, right? And I think, you know, we talked about it before, just the swinginess of arena.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, that's definitely true. That's what the event is going to do. That's what all the events are going to do.
Right. And this is something in which once it disappears, it'll take away some of this, right? Because the event definitely pushes it. But for me, I'm just like, that's really the problem I see in this event. You know, like the inability to know what Cavern Dreamer gives them, right? The inability for me to play around. Because even if I predict Timely Wanderer into 5-mana UI, I'm just like, okay, like, well, what do I do about that, right? Like, I can't actually do anything really about that.
Yeah, and my point is that existing cards did exactly the same thing. Well, if you Stonehill into like I don't know, Lich King or whatever, like
Sunkeeper Tarum,
like they did the exact same thing. They just did it at half the rate.
They did it at half the rate, and the rate is important, right? Because if every one of the cards is like generate a random card 1/1, then we are in Tavern Brawl mode, right? So, I think that is like a Tavern Brawl.
So if you're looking at problematic cards as it used to be 20% of potential arena cards, you're now Tavern Brawl, these Taverns of Time cards are doubly problematic. Taverns cards are about 20% of the cards. Old cards are 80%. So you do a little back of the napkin math. You have old is 0.8. New is 0.4, 1.2, so you're on net in a 20% more swingy meta than you were before Taverns of Time came out. That's the math that we're working on. And so if an event makes things 20% more random than they were before, it's still not over the line based on our experience in Taverns of Time, I think. And so the line is more like something like 50%.
Yeah, I don't think... Look, I'm not saying that like things were fine before Taverns of Time, and with Taverns of Time, things just like got out of hand, right? No, this is a problem that has existed and has sort of gotten worse, or, you know, just things have gotten more swingy and a little bit more crazy, right? And then Taverns of Time just adds to it, and it's something which we've talked about before. I don't particularly like that direction, right? Right,
but it's an event. We all knew it was going to do that. Right. Because your basis of objecting can't be like, oh, things are getting more RNG. Well, you could have told me that without showing me any of the cards. Right?
Well, right. I mean, no, I'm not saying that like it shouldn't happen for an event or / it wouldn't happen for an event. Like, first of all, we predicted it. It's more in line with what we said before. It's like, well, this is an event, and then it just takes away from normal arena, and then it results in this, right? Like, totally predictable. I agree.
I don't know if Taverns of Time cards, let's say They nerf Cavern Dreamer by 1 health, and what's the other one that had some really big swings? I don't even care about Master Realities. They take Cavern Dreamer down by 1 health, and otherwise all of the time cards, 100% of them, stay in the arena for the rest of this year. Like, how upset are you?
Fairly upset.
Really? I wouldn't be that upset. I don't think these are like. I think I would be more upset if they put GVG back, because I think GVG is more swingy than plus 20% in the net effect. Partly because there's more cards, but also because GVG was really freaking swingy.
I think GVG was not good, but I think if you just put GVG back in, we have ways to deal with it now. With all the AoEs, with all the like sticky stuff on the board, and with just the power level in general, I think GVG when it came out was extremely problematic, right? But I think if you just introduced it back again, I think classes now have the tools to deal with it.
So you think GVG coming back would increase the variance in the arena more than less than 20% from before Taverns of Time Arena?
The variance? Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. I would disagree. I think GVG would actually increase it more than these Taverns of Time cards, because a lot of it is like there's a lot of neutral cards that were very random or snowbally. Like you're like Mech Warpers, like Piloted Shredders, like so many. Not even class cards, just like neutral cards, right? Because neutral cards are the problematic ones. Okay. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm landing on this, at least. Like, I don't think the Taverns of Time meta is too much more variance than the old meta. Like, I think Merps is about right when he says the number, which is about 20% more random, right? Like, I did the math based on his experience, not even on my own experience, which, like, I lost to BS, that was to regular arena, much more than the BS, the Taverns of Time arena. Not just at a 60%, 40% ratio. My experience is probably like 75-25 or 80-20. And that would make the variance increase even lower than plus 20%. But even if it is plus 20%, I don't think that's that bad. Obviously bad. I'm not like disagreeing that arena would be better without Taverns of Time. But for an event, definitely not bad. And even if we kept it, like even if this was the next expansion, like, I don't know. I think this is, overall, I think this is fine. So people ask a lot, like, oh, how many weeks do you want it to be? Like, we want it to be, like, 1 week, obviously. Like, shorter, you get it and then you leave. But, like, am I okay with it being longer? I'm okay with it being the entire rest of the year. Like, I don't like it. I'm okay with it. Like, I wouldn't quit Arena if this existed for the rest of the year. I wouldn't be terribly bitter about it either. Now, if you made Chromie and Morazond and that giant all commons, then I'd probably quit Arena. But we're not at that line. We're not at that line yet. Even with these cards. And I think you can see it too, right? Like we're literally coming off of 2 12-win runs back to back heading into our coup tonight. And we had good decks and everything, but it wasn't like we were playing and it was like, oh, there's no way to control any of this any more than usual. Like, I feel like, what were we screwed by a lot? Like MCT, right? Still MCT, and that's been diluted. And that's been diluted compared to where it was a week ago before the event.
Sure. And still, it's just, it adds on to the, once again, like, we're still complaining about the swinginess of it, right? Like, it's not the specific cards, it is just the swinginess. And what vessel that takes, what vehicle that swinginess takes, it's all just swinginess, right? Yeah. So it's just about the overall swinginess. That's it.
Okay. So I want to talk about more specifics into the meta and how to deal with the meta. Going back to, we talked about Mage, we talked about Hunter. They're good. People really like Shaman. That's probably because they have the 2 top cards class-wise. According to Blizzard, they have a first bucket card in Stasis Elemental, which I'm actually okay. So one, Shaman does not have very good top bucket cards compared to other classes' top bucket cards. They just don't. It's like Earth Elemental, Volcano, Flame Tongue, Fire Alley. Like, they're good cards. they're not like Fire Ellie's literally a classic card.
Yep.
Like Earth Elemental's a classic card, Flame Tongue Totem's a classic card, and nothing crazy's happening here. So Stasis Elemental, the top bucket, in any other class, I think would be pretty much undraftable. In Shaman, not only is it draftable, but the win rate is still pretty damn high, like surprisingly high, I think, for people who are drafting it. And remember, the Earthen Might, the card that's actually making all these elemental synergies really worth it in Shaman, it's still misbucketed. They didn't rebucket it. It's still in the God knows what, like one of the later buckets. But it's been diluted, so you're not going to get it all that often. You're actually going to get offered like, I don't know, maybe one of it per run instead of before where you were averaging like 1.5 almost. But even with that and the elemental part not triggering, Stasis Elemental has been doing work statistically, and I'm going to caution that because I fell into this trap myself where someone Stasis Elementaled my stuff and then I just misplayed. Like, I couldn't remove it on the next turn. I would have not misplayed if I could remove it on the next turn, but as it turns out, I couldn't remove it on my next turn. And then every turn after that turn, I misplayed because I would always forget that you can kill the Stasis Elemental and your minions unfreeze on that turn itself, right? And you get your attack back. And I think if I face the same situation again, I would not misplay, but that's what's happening right now in the arena.
So
right?
This is less about the card and a lot more about you.
No. It's about not just me. It's about human beings and how we deal with issues. And I'm not saying everybody.
That other people would act like you.
I'm going to say a lot of other people, especially the average player you face, is going to do this problem.
Very unique. Very, very unique. Yes, there you go.
I think there's a lot of people right now misplaying against Stasis Elemental, and that's driving up the win rates. So I do think that Stasis Elemental is not your best bet for like 12-win runs, especially now that we're 1 week into the meta than it was last week. But I do understand where they're coming from in the top bucket. It's by putting Stasis Elemental in the top bucket. Now, the card that we had thought would be in the top bucket, and that I think everybody thought was ridiculous, is Masters of Realities, which we rated a 163. We rated Stasis Elemental a 130, and we upped it to a 135 in the middle of the week. But that's still just like a low premium card. I really think it's just everyone misplaying against it that's making it be that effective.
I think you're extrapolating a lot from your own experience and being like, well, that's
because I used it too. It's not like I haven't used Stasis Elemental, and it like didn't do that much. Like, I was not particularly impressed by the card when I was playing with it, and when I was playing against it. That one time, the first time that I saw it and it was used and it like was not killed on the very first turn, like I could see other people doing that pretty consistently. Not like one person repeatedly, but that everybody's first time against, or like first couple times against Stasis Elemental.
This is a good time for me to sort of say that I like Stasis Elemental from the start, right? I think I specifically told you, I singled out this card. I was just like...
130 was your lowest for Stasis Elemental and my highest rating.
And that never happens.
Yeah. Merps hates on all cards. He rates all cards super low.
But I also saw, like, there was not a lot of hype about this card, but just... And I think this is something I'm trying to get better at as we... Because expansion after expansion, I look back on our evaluations. I'm like, okay, what did we get wrong, right? Or what did we undervalue? And stuff like something like Stasis Elemental, I'm just like, this thing is really annoying, right? Like, it just the amount of times in which you can completely lock out a minion, and then just make it not exist, essentially, right?
But to do that, you like have to like your Stasis Elemental can't be attacking stuff because it'll get hurt.
Right. And then at the very least, you know, like it's so at the very least, it's a 3/5 in which, so at worst, it's a 3/5 for 4, right? And that's when you're like pretty behind, or like they just have like a perfect answer, which like, so the floor of it is really not terrible. Like, you've just played 3/5s before, right? And then the upside is huge. And I'm just like, you know, if you're Shaman, you can certainly make it annoying enough. Like, you have the removal to back it up. You have the annoying taunts and stuff to back it up as well. But that Stasis Elemental also is a card in which I'm just like, I like this card. I like the design, and I hate a lot on design as well, as you guys have seen. I'm just like, I think the design is cool. Master of Realities, that's a different thing. That's just Blizzard just being like, let's see what can happen. Which they do with Shaman a little bit too much, I think.
Yeah. The Shaman's the official, let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens. Right. In terms of AoE, it's like, let's see what happens. In terms of like playing minions, like, let's see what happens. They really just like, that's the Shaman identity now.
And I don't get what they expect to happen. Like, Master of Realities, we rated a 163 as the top Shaman card outside of Unstable Evolution. It's tied with Volcano. And Unstable Evolution is also not in the first bucket. I think every single arena player that is infinite and knows anything about playing Shaman, like they're not just exclusively playing. No, even if they don't know anything about Shaman, they played against Shaman. They would put Unstable Evolution in the top bucket, like without hesitation. Like that would be the first card they put in the top bucket. Like depending on how you play, it would probably be like Unstable Elemental, Volcano, and like Fire Elemental.
Yeah,
that's like some like guaranteed cards that are in the top bucket depending on like how you play. And Blizzard just like does not see it that way. And again, like maybe I don't know, do these cards? I guess these cards are better when you're on the board, and good players are better at being on the board than bad players, and maybe the statistics don't work out that way, but they're also highly random, and you figure like that would even things out. But I don't know, who knows. Anyway, Master of Realities, very, very good card. We thought it was super good. It is super good. Shaman's at a 52.1% win rate right now. Make of that what you will. It's a good place to be right now for Shaman. And it's an even better place to be because Paladins, although you still see a lot of them, they're not as powerful as before. And that's good because Shaman's hard counter was, always is Paladin.
Yeah. Look, Shaman is also one of these classes in which, like, if it's number one, it's really problematic because so much of Shaman is RNG.
Yep.
So if regular players or just the community at large is winning so much that Shaman is number one, even with all of their like super RNG cards and RNG hero power and everything, that means Shaman is like really good. That it's in a really, really good place. Mm-hmm. And so it's much more common that we see something, for example, like Shaman being mid-tier, but someone like Tachi or Shady, sort of figures it out, right? It's like, oh, okay, like, wow, this is really good. And I figured out how to sort of put it all together. But if Shaman is number one, that just means it's like blatantly overpowered, just because you have so many RNG factors, and it takes a lot of skill to sort of balance all of that out.
I don't know. I always take the opposite view of Shaman. There's so many RNG factors so that if you're like an okay player, it'll help you more than if you're a good player. So if Shaman's number one, it's probably not really number one. Like for a good player, it's more likely that it's like number 3 or 4 because you're not going to want to risk everything on hitting that totem button and like needing an air elemental or a healing totem or whatever. But it goes both ways because you also have to know when to use it and when to run the probabilities, but still. I don't know. Overall, I take the opposite view of Shaman, and I think that what happened in May was the exception, not the rule with Shaman, where there was a way to do something with the class that made it very, very good, and is not the way that Shamans are normally built by most people. I don't think that happens in most metas.
I think the totems and overload are such a trap for like common players, that they don't plan well, or that they just don't know the value of a totem at any given moment, right? Because that changes.
That's true.
Like,
they overvalue totems in the beginning and undervalue totems later.
Exactly. So I think that those two are huge traps. Or, and I've seen this so often. Like at the very beginning, they'll use a lightning bolt, right? And then, but then that locks them out of their turn 4. And then it's like, it's nice and it must feel good for them to get rid of that minion right away. But, and then I keep track of their hand. I'm just like, if you had just let me have my 2/3, right? Which really wasn't doing much to you. you would have been in a much better spot, because then you could have dropped your, like 4/5 on turn 4 instead of like overloading and then just being able to only drop like a 2/3 on your turn 4. So something like that. And I think that if you give, and this is something we've said over and over again, it's like the more potential you give normal players to make a mistake, the more often they'll make a mistake. Yep. Right. Yeah.
And by the way, just to hit home again, and I know Tachi Derp like really hammers this a lot. And he was the number 1 player in a last month, playing mostly Shaman. Earthen Might's literal statistical win rate by HS replay players, which are like slightly above average players. They're not like purely average players. They probably average like 4 wins per run, maybe 4.5. Is 59%. It is beat out by only Hex, Stormforge, Axe, Flametongue, Totem, and Fire Elemental. That's it. So the cards that it is beat out by is one. Okay, so it's a bunch of cards in the very top bucket. Hex is in the second bucket. Flametongue, Totem, and Fire Elemental are in the top bucket. Stormforge, Axe, they continue to under bucket always for no good reason, is in the fourth bucket. Like, I have no idea. This card has been one of the best cards in Shaman since the very beginning of the game. Like, I don't know how it could be bucketed so low. But then Earthen Might is bucketed in the fifth bucket, which means Blizzard, statistically, and remember, Blizzard uses statistics to put these cards in the correct buckets. They have statistically put about a dozen class cards above Earthen Might that they shouldn't have, based on literal statistics, and we see the statistics.
Yeah, I don't really.
It destroys me every time I look at this. I don't know, right? Like their system would work fine if they like listen to their system. Even Silver Sword has a bigger argument, win rate wise, to be third bucket than Earthen Might to be fifth bucket.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, it's one of those cards in which you just look at the number of elementals and you just look at, and also just Shaman with their ability to stick on the board. A +2/+2 is really good, right? Yeah. This is something like I know for a while constructed Shamans were even playing Earthen Might, and not because of like the elemental thing. It's just like, wait, like +2/+2 is just good. It's something that might be not as valuable in other classes, but in Shaman, it's like, oh, this is a good card.
Yep. All right. So I thought we'd talk a little about Shaman, and then we'll go over some very quickly. I'm going to make a list of cards you should not ever pick because they're over bucketed, and Blizzard's probably not going to rebucket it. And the first one on that list, one, I want you to never pick it because really it's over bucketed, and two, I want you to never pick it because like it's just RNG and you want to stay away from it. And it's Wildlands Adventurer. That's the one that generates the rag and the
Sylvanas.
Then the Sylvanas. I don't know if Blizzard purposefully overbucketed this to get rid of the RNG. Part of me hopes that they like had a choice between the second and third bucket, and they're like, second bucket, this card can get out of control. But even if they didn't, it's overbucketed. Like, even if we don't take a penalty for RNG, it's heavily overbucketed. And you should just never pick that card. Like, even if you're an average player, you should never pick that card.
Yeah, because look, you could win with the rag, or you can lose with like the 3 ice lances and then conceals.
Yeah, your chance is still only 2 out of 14 or something like that to get the rag or Sylvanas. And then there's like a couple of other good ones, but most of the time you're gonna get a crap card, not a good card, not even an okay card.
Yep.
Okay. We went over cards that are just bad, so I won't go over it. Like, for some reason, Blizzard decided Harbinger of Catastrophe was in the third bucket. That's the Boulderfist Ogre that summons a very large minion for your opponent on the next turn. But yeah. Infinite Murloc, we told you to stay away from before, but definitely stay away from it. It's not even in the bottom buckets, it's in the fifth bucket. Like, you're not going to get enough of it to make it worth it, and it is way over bucketed.
Yeah. Yep. That's definitely something that I have seen more often than I should, I would say.
And I don't know, the other ones I think you can make an argument for. Like, they may not be correctly bucketed, but I think if you picked it, it wouldn't be like, oh, this is a really horrible pick. Um, yeah, I don't really have anything else. Those are just the ones that were actually really bad. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that's basically it. Look, everyone that every single time that I have faced Infinite Murloc, about half of the time I can see that they've tried to support it as well, right? That they've either drafted more of it or they've just done stuff to try to support it. In terms of like drafting like a couple Infinite Murlocs, getting possibility seekers, right, to try to shuffle and just try to find the ones that they've like put into their deck. And I knock on wood here, I've never been beaten by Infinite Murlocs. It's just it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. The offering rates don't support it. And
No.
one more thing that I need to put out, just because someone in chat, Nahadizi, was talking about this, Timeline Witness. That's right. Timeline Witness is also over bucketed by a lot. It's the 2/3 that at the beginning of your turn, if it lives, you discover a card instead of draw a card. It's a 2/3 for 3 mana. And Blizzard has it bucketed in the third bucket, which means that they think it's about the same as the following 3 drops. Tangle for Mystic, Walnut Sprite, Phantom Militia. And it's not even close. We have it rated very low to start, and the stats for it are horrible. Like if you look at the win rates for Timeline Witness, it's like you really shouldn't pick it. They've over bucketed it, and everything kind of lines up. We have it at a 96, which is around where a Happy Ghoul is, or like a Sewer Crawler, like. That's about how good the card is, and you can listen to the last Lightforge for more details about why it's bad. But like, it's not a guaranteed effect. The effect is not that good in Arena compared to a constructed. It's just they've over bucketed this one as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Overall meta tips. Let's end on that. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we do overall meta again, and then end with some tips on just how to win?
Sure. I would say, look. Here are the ways to sort of win in this meta, and here's the way that I've won. And look, I don't play as much as a lot of other people play, so disclaimer number 1. And number 2, stuff is still developing. I'm sure other people might have other ways, but the consistent ways to win that I have seen are either ways in which you will outvalue the opponent, right? Which is what Cavern Dreamer does, first of all, right? And it also helps that it's an early game card. Like a lot of these Infinite Engine cards that we've seen throughout Hearthstone, like they tend to be fairly expensive. So Cavern Dreamer kind of breaks that mold. But you either win through the super infinite value, like the Cavern Dreamers, or you win by beating that, right? By going aggressive with something like Rogue, by being aggressive with something like Hunter. I talked with Shady a couple of days after the event started, and he said that he got a 12-0 Druid. And if you look at
Druids suck.
Druids suck in terms of the win rate. They are at the very bottom. Like
they also got sucky cards that are not interesting in Taverns of Time. Why was Shady playing a Druid? Why?
Because he's a boss and he just doesn't need any good cards, I guess.
So first of all, Druid was one of the best classes before this event happened, so that didn't really change too much, but like it's just not interesting. I don't know. Why was Shady being a boring streamer?
I was talking with Shady, and he's just like, and I think he identified what lots of people identify. It's like, okay, with this event, people are taking the new cards. New cards are slow, and he's like, any sort of class that can be aggressive is good, right? And we identified this as well. Like we want to play Hunter, but with Druid, he just he picked a Druid that was able to get onto the board, and then he just played.
And that's how you normally play Druid anyway, even before the time event. Like you can look at, like we have on YouTube a 12-1 Druid that I got right before the event happened. It's called Classic, and it's called Classic because it used no Witchwood cards, or really cards from any other expansion. It just used like classic and basic Druid cards. I think like some of the highlights were like 2 Naturalizes and 2 Sunwalkers, and a bunch of like not Call of the Wild. Is it Call of the Wild? No, Call of the Wild is a really good Hunter card. What's the 3/2 Raptor for Druid? How am I blanking on this card? Power of the Wild. There we go. They're all of the Wild. There's too many cards that ended of the Wild, and they span different classes. It's confusing. Okay. It may not be confusing to other people. It's confusing to me.
It's not always of the wild. It's like of the scythe, of the claw, of whatever.
Right. But I mean, like, Call of the Wild, Mark of the Wild, many other things of the wild, I'm pretty sure that were, like, old cards or whatever. Or are those it?
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Anyway, so that was, like, a 12-win run that, like, also didn't use any of the new stuff. And it was very aggressive. And that's what you do with Druid. You be very aggressive, and you have a lot of success, even in, like, kind of regardless of the meta. But this meta would work even better than the meta I was in.
Yeah. So I think for this meta, and what has certainly worked for other streamers and for us as well, is to either be on the board early, snowball from there, and hit face, which I think our last stream, we had a good example of each one, right? So first we had a Paladin one that was fairly unspectacular, but we always tried to get onto the board first. Whenever we couldn't, that's when we died.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's when we died. And we get onto the board and then we finish it off with Vine Cleaver or Silver Sword. Like, not a surprising way to win with Paladin at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is just the old formula. But once again, that is
that deck had no new cards.
Yeah.
Like, basically no time cards.
Yeah, I think we had like a that 5/5 that draws a card, right? I think we had that,
we didn't
and
have
I think
that.
we had.
I would have known if we had a Wildlands.
Oh, I don't know.
No.
We
had like, I think, one.
Yeah.
Do we have a Stasis Dragon? No, you wouldn't pick a Stasis Dragon.
We had Stasis Dragon, I think, for the
mage one, which I helped you draft, and that's why there was a Stasis
Dragon.
Stasis
would have been bad for the Paladin.
Yeah, no, it's true. It would not fit that deck.
So you can either win with a board-centric early game and then, shift that into aggro, or what you do is play the infinite value, right? Mm-hmm. And, you can either do that through, like, sort of Warlocks and Priests used to be really good at that, right? Like, just a super value. But now Mage with Cavern Dreamer is literally infinite value.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you protect that and you just get all the cards in the world. And then you protect that for 5 turns, you've gotten an extra 5 small cards with many more cards to come. So I think those are the 2 ways to win. And any sort of deck that I found in the middle, for example, I had a Rogue that was just sort of like, you would potentially call it a control rogue in past metas, right? But it was just like,
now it's kind of a mid-range rogue.
Yeah, now it's kind of a mid-range rogue, and that just doesn't do it, right? I die to the aggressiveness of those paladins I was talking about, and then I just get completely outvalued by those Cavern Dreamers.
Like,
right?
You can't play attrition. And that's kind of the archetype that we talk about when it comes to just, I will eventually have more card advantage than you. I don't do much else, but as long as I don't die, it's fine. It's really hard to play attrition in this meta because the taunts are diluted, which is one of the reasons why aggro works really well, because taunts and board clears are diluted. So you need classes that before had way too many taunts and or board clears, and probably you need both, because one of the things with you can't just like go to the end and say I have more cards than you. You need to keep flipping the board on your opponent, because your opponent is going to flip the board on you. Because remember, we kept talking about this is a 20% more game flippy meta, which is also why we prefer aggro in this meta, because in aggro, if they flip the board on you, you lose. Your whole point is to not have them flip the board on you to begin with, so you don't care if they can flip the board on you 5 times. Once they flip the board on you once, you're kind of like, okay, I'm in reach mode rather than fight for the board mode. And that works really well, because usually what people have now is, let's say they used to have in the good old days like one thing card per deck that flips the board, and before these time cards came out, they had like 3 ways to flip the board. Now they have like 4 ways, and it's just getting really consistent. So if you play the long game, you don't just need like cards that give you a lot of card advantage and card draws and cards that draw more cards. You also need ways to flip the board, and that is very, 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 very important. And that's why classes like Priest don't work. They are very bad in this meta, not because they don't have a lot of really good card advantage cards. They do, but because their ways of flipping the board did not get better, and it got diluted out. and they had like the bare minimum necessary to kind of hold the class together beforehand, and so they've kind of just fallen apart on this control archetype, like, period. So if you're talking about it's priest, you can only push so much, but you kind of have to do that now. So if you're playing that control kind of game, mages work, shamans work, warlocks work, nothing else works.
Yep.
Just don't even try it with any other class. It does not work. Like, you have to have a really particular deck for any of the other classes to make it work. And it's no surprise that Mage, Shaman, and Warlock are your top 3 classes right now, statistically, on HS Replay, because they can go both ways. For every other class, don't fall into the trap of trying to play mid-range. You will lose to Mage, Shaman, Warlock, and they are everywhere. You'll probably lose to Paladin too. You'll probably lose to Hunter as well, and those are 4 and 5. If you're mid-range, you're probably losing to Rogue, period. So you're not in a good spot right now, mid-range.
Right.
And instead, you want to go aggressive, because you can't go in that control way with the new time cards, because you're not going to be able to flip the board as often as your opponents. So you have the one other path, aggression. Make sure you have your curve out, have 1-drops if you need to, have like 1 or 2 ways to counter a board flip or to like reset up afterwards. When they board flip you, to give you a little bit of that like extra range, and be sure to get reach, because remember, less taunts, less board clears. That's what your opponents are living with. And if your opponents have less taunts and fewer taunts and fewer board clears, that means your aggressive strategy works better. Now, to be fair, you also have less reach than you did before. But if everybody's slowing down and you're going faster, you can get more face damage than the reach you're missing from like direct damage.
Good advice. I think that's generally accurate. So yeah, I think the lesson is like, don't play priest.
Yeah, don't play priest.
Just
and if you
don't
play druid,
priest.
Don't try to do that stally thing unless you actually have a UI.
Draft your Savage Roars, draft your manas, right?
Yeah.
Get your good 2-drops, which druid has, and just go for it. And sometimes it doesn't work. That's always the weakness of aggro, right? Sometimes you don't get there because they just have the answers. But
and when we talk aggro, we don't mean like don't have any cards that's like 5 mana or more. That's not the aggro. Like, this is not like GVG aggro. When we say aggro, we just mean you actually have a 2-drop curve and a 3-drop curve. Like, you have at least 6 1/2 drops. You have at least like 5 3-drops. You have at least 4 4-drops. Like, once you have those set up, you're pretty aggressive compared to the rest of the meta. Like, actual drops, like well-statted minions for those, like 2 3s for 2, like 3 4s for 3-drops. Like, if you have like I don't know, like a 2/2 for a 2-drop, it's not really a 2-drop, right?
No.
So like, make sure you have that set up. And if you have like 3 1-drops in your deck, then you're definitely aggro. So keep that in mind when we say aggro. We don't mean like don't have 6 mana cards. In fact, you kind of need a couple 6 mana cards, because there are still board clears. There's fewer of them, but you need stuff to do with your mana when you get too far ahead, right? And I talked about this on Valleytown a lot, about why I like cards like Stasis Elemental, not Stasis Elemental, Stasis Dragon. It's because when I play aggro, I always find it really awkward to do nothing for a turn. And if you have cards that are either like pure card draw or like a Stasis Dragon or some other way, you can use your mana for free effectively, because what you really want to do is put nothing more on the board, and then you get something out of it.
Yeah.
So having a couple of those cards in your deck also really does make a difference.
Yep. Good point.
All right. So do we have let's end on a question from the GOAT, because we really kind of broke the way we normally do Lightforges this week. So let's end on the question from the GOAT.
Sure. All right. So I would say question from the GOAT this week. We have a lot of wacky kind of cards, right? For Taverns of Time. If you could swap one card and put it in another class, right? Like, swap class cards, what would you do? Or like, basically you can make a change of 1 to 2 cards for this event.
Just swapping classes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Huh. I'm gonna try to rescue a card that gets no play, but I like.
Okay, I like this.
I would put Blessing of Aeons into either Shaman or Hunter?
Yeah, I was gonna say Blessing of Aeons. That giving it to a shaman with all the ways to protect it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be fairly powerful. It could also just be like more annoying, right? Like a
Well,
little bit
that's the
too
point.
annoying.
It's because it's not. You can't. She probably shouldn't draft it right now, right? Like
Right.
it's a little. I mean, it's kind of significantly underpowered for where it's at.
Yep.
And yeah, that'd be a way to rescue the card. But you're right; it gets more snowbally. It's a potentially problematic card to begin with. So
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think that thing is because it gets no play right now,
yeah,
right? It gets
for good
absolutely
reason.
no play for good reason. True. Um, I would say something like if you give something like Bronze Broodmother
Mm-hmm.
to a hunter, I think that would be fairly interesting as well. Any sort
Mm.
of free stats that you give a hunter, um, or even just a ping. And I understand that paladins don't have pings either, but they get it a little bit easier than
Yeah,
hunters, right? So just doing that for hunters, in which it's like, okay, you get a fairly underwhelming card, a 5 mana 5/5
yeah,
dragon,
especially
right?
for Hunter.
Especially for hunter, but you give them a free 1/1. I think that would be like pretty cool because something like Bronze Broodmother, I'm just like, this doesn't, because it's just an underwhelming card for Paladin, right? But I think it would actually be interesting um, for Hunter. And also, I just want to see Fate Cleaver like in more classes. Period. Because we don't see warriors enough, but I think the design of the card is just so freaking cool,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think and you're not always going to hit its effect that often, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a cool design in which it has definite upside. But then let's say you have the card in your hand as well, and you're just like, I don't really want to kill this, right?
Yeah.
So I want to see Fate Cleaver. Yeah, like I want to see this as almost as kind of like a Grimy Goons kind of thing, or like a Cabal kind of thing. Just give it to some more classes. I'd
Yeah.
like to see that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we're gonna play Arena Coup Warrior next. That's the class that came up. So that'll be interesting. If you're listening to this on the Lightforge podcast, you can find all the arena coops on YouTube the day after we do them. And also, if you are curious about any of the 12-win runs we mentioned, as long as they're a 12-win run that we mentioned that we did on stream, it'll be up on YouTube and edited, so it gets rid of any like lulls and pauses in the game to make it for a better viewing experience. And we still explain all of our plays. So that's a really cool thing that we do. And epically tossed, as well as David Attenborough says, do the editing for these videos, and they're a really good resource, we think. So right now we have our very first hunter run up on YouTube. That's unedited because it did not go 12. It went pretty far though. And then we have the paladin run that we had talked about before that Merp started, and I joined him like 3 wins in. That's edited and on YouTube. It's 12-win paladin. It's called Eggs of Time. And on Wednesday morning, we're going to put up our mage run, our 12-win mage run. So we're actually on a double 12-win back-to-back like roll right now. We're gonna try to extend it with warrior, getting away from these like normal, easier to play classes into a harder one. So hopefully we get to draft some fake cleavers because those are really good.
Those are really good. Just any sort of like Fire Warlock's good, Arcanite Reaper is good. This is just an in between, right? Yeah, that's basically it.
All right, Question from the Goat is brought to you by our patrons, patreon.com/grinninggoat. Thank you guys so much, everybody that supports us through Patreon. It really means a lot, and it's a good way for us to get a consistent source of income so that we can keep this going. And our top patrons for June are 4P, Afro Ninja TB, Ingo, Talon, Zaruvi, Eric L, Kid Gloves, RV Night Train, and Shep X13. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. That's it from us this week. We'll see you guys on next week's Lightforge as we dig even deeper into the Taverns of Time meta. Until then, this is Oddwick.
This is Merps. Good luck in the arena, guys.
All right.